Yes, okay. So welcome everyone. I have the pleasure today to talk to Johnny Vulkan, whose work, I mean, I can't say I admire him because I don't know him yet, but I'm in massive awe of the company he founded uh, for their work, but probably even more important for their approach to creativity. And if that wasn't be enough. Back in the days, I had a couple of conversations with big consultancies that are not to be named, who wanted to move into the space of creativity. And the one company that always came up that they were interested in and that seemed to have cracked it is yours. So I feel a little stupid to talk only now to you, but here we have the opportunity. Welcome, Johnny.
Thank you very much. I should start by saying I don't think we fully cracked it. I think we're still a work in progress, but I'd like to think we're doing a relatively good job of being on that journey, and maybe that's a theme that will keep coming back, continuous change. So yes, thank you very much. Lovely intro, and yes, we actually turned 20 a couple of weeks ago, so we're 20 years old as a company, and we're a very different company than what I expected, and in some ways much more successful,
That's not
and
too
in
bad.
some ways quite a long way from where I thought we'd be and where we
Mhm.
started. I'm sure I'll touch on that as I talk. So maybe I'll start by talking a bit about my background because it probably
Yes.
leads into where we've ended up. And I go back to my university days, and I was studying marketing and psychology, and wasn't really sure whether I wanted to be a client or work in agencies, and did the various kind of grad recruitment things in the UK, and wasn't doing very well actually. I was kind of getting to final interviews with several of the big agencies, but not ever closing. So I wasn't
Mhm.
getting past the gate. And in particular, I remember Abbott Mead Vickers and Saatchi were the two that I'd got down to the final round, and it was a recession year, and I just missed out. And I got a very polite letter from Saatchi saying, "Really sorry, you just missed out. We really liked you, but not this time." And I was a little disheartened, but I decided that I shouldn't take no for an answer. And so um, I mocked up using what I think was Quark Express at the time, um, the entire front page of Campaign magazine, where one of the articles was about a future version of me, and the other articles were about things that were happening in the marketing industry. So I mocked it all up, looked like a front page of Campaign. Then I wrote a British Airways ad that was kind of featuring a theme to me, and I printed them out, put them in a postal tube, and sent them to 6 people at Saatchi, and didn't hear a thing. And I was also a little disappointed by that, but then thought, you know what, I'm just going to call up, see what happened. Didn't hear back from the beautiful things I made, and I spoke to an account director, and he said, "Oh, has no one been in contact with you, Johnny? We received your packages and someone was meant to get in contact." I said, no one's got in contact. "Well, the next time you're in London," because I was studying in Birmingham at the time, "please pop in and say hi, and just chat about what you're up to and where you're trying to get into." And so a few weeks later, I found myself in London, popped in to say hi. The head of HR came down and said, "We have created an extra space on the graduate recruitment scheme for you, and we'd love you to start in September." So that was kind of a first lesson
Wow.
in persistence and not taking
Yeah.
no for an answer, and finding creative ways to keep opening the door or finding ways through. So if I hadn't have done the posters, if I hadn't have followed up with a phone call, if I hadn't have gone down to London to have the meeting, then I wouldn't have got started in advertising at Saatchi's. And so
That
it was a
is
kind of a good
really.
example, good early example of how you use your energy
Mhm.
in the face of adversity to keep going.
That is really interesting because when I studied for as long as humanly possible, ended up doing a PhD, and then in startup lingo, I pivoted toward advertising, and I got because I didn't fit in. I got one rejection letter after the other. And I never went that route of going on one agency really hard. But the best advice I got, and that helps now having my own startup, is doesn't matter. Just make it a numbers game. And the first job is all that matters, no matter where.
Yeah, I think
That is,
that's true actually. And I did actually follow up with most companies that
yeah.
rejected me. I think that's a good thing to have as a kind of a mindset.
Mhm.
Um, but what was interesting, so I started at Saatchi's, and what I quickly realized was it wasn't for me as a place.
Oh no,
Because
all that
Saatchi,
effort.
Saatchi's at that point was the best creative agency in
Mm.
London, but they were probably the furthest away from marketing as a philosophy. And as
Mm.
someone who studied marketing, I really wanted to solve the marketing problems in a very holistic way. And Saatchi really wanted to produce work that would win an ad.
Mm.
Um, and in some cases, people were concerned about whether it would do a good job for the clients. But in many cases, I found there were people that weren't that invested in that as being the narrative, which was kind of
Yeah.
quite upsetting to me. And I would often find myself siding with clients in meetings rather than siding with the agency. And so after a few months, I'd got approached by a headhunter, and then I found myself working for CDP, which was owned by Dentsu. And I went there to work on integrated accounts.
Yeah.
Because for me, I felt actually answering it very holistically would be the best way to do
Mm.
it. So I found myself at CDP working for Johnny Hornby, who's one of the founders of the AND
Wow.
partnership, and a gentleman called Ben Langdon, who was very kind of notorious in the British advertising scene in um, the mid to late 90s. And that was fascinating because we were doing integration, but we were doing it in a very, I think, learning basically. I don't think there weren't many integrated solutions in the UK.
Mm.
So we really had to kind of push quite hard to go on a steep learning curve to offer an integrated solution. And it kind of ticks a lot of my boxes in terms of feeling that I was delivering against a more holistic marketing thing. But it was so intense that after 2 years of doing that, I got to a point where actually I decided that maybe this entire industry wasn't what I thought it would be, and maybe
Yeah.
I should stop. And so after only 4 years in the industry, I left advertising to go traveling.
Okay. Again, because it's absolute, I'm massively fear driven. So, what on earth gave you the confidence first to leave Saatchi's after a couple of months and then
Couple of
leave
years, years, 18 months,
three?
18
Okay,
months.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Blimey. And then leave the industry after 4 years.
Well, I think
Were you
I so
born that way?
no, and actually everything I do, I'm not. I wouldn't describe myself as a risk taker.
Yeah.
Um, and so actually on the process, and it was actually my father who was most worried because on one level everything was brilliant. Same with at Saatchi's, I was doing very well. I'd been promoted. CDP, I was doing very well. I'd been promoted. So on the exterior, I had a great position. I was still very
Mm.
young. I had an amazing car. I had a good salary. So I had all the exterior trappings of success. And yet I found myself continuously stressed, a lot of dissonance, wasn't spending enough time with
Mm.
friends. So the balance wasn't right for me. And I still felt we weren't doing it quite right, I
Mm.
guess. Um, and my dad was like, "What do you mean you're going to stop and go traveling?" I said, "Well, yeah, I think I should just take stock of where I am." And he said, "So what I did for my dad is I did 3 interviews with people at other agencies who I knew had been interested over the years. And I
Mm.
just was very honest and said, I'm thinking of going traveling for a few months. I'd be interested if you would be interested in talking to me when I return in a few months." And they all said, firstly, amazing that you've come to see us to explain your path and trajectory. It sounds like you've really thought this through, and what a wonderful gift you're giving yourself by going traveling. And yes, of course, when you return, we'd love to talk. And I explained to my father that I'd had 3 interviews with people, not with a view to get a job now, but with a view to have a conversation in a few months' time when I got back. I think that reassured him. And actually, truthfully, it probably reassured me that maybe I wasn't throwing it all away if I decided I want to go back. into advertising. And so I went traveling, and it was the best thing I'd ever done. And I would urge anybody to give yourself some time, either before you start or, you know, early on in your career, before you have big commitments like mortgages and kids, to just give yourself that time to travel. I, you know, did it on a very low budget, stayed in sort of youth hostels and backpackers, went across Australia, New Zealand, parts of Asia, and then across the US. Loved every minute of it. Almost took a job in advertising in Australia, but decided it was a bit too far away from the UK, so passed on that. And then returned and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And it was coming up to Christmas, and a headhunter heard I was back in town. He said, "Oh, there's lots of things going around." The first of which was, and this is now 1996. This guy would like to meet you. He's doing something to do with the internet, which in 1996 was still kind of quite a weird concept. It's a web business. Would you like to meet him? So I met this guy, and I did not understand anything that he was talking about. The whole thing was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's 1996. There's no Google. There's basically Yahoo Mail and Hotmail. And I was like, I really don't understand anything. So to this day, I can't remember who he was or what the business was, but there is a different version of Johnny Vulkan that in 1996 joined a tech startup before tech startups were even a thing. But instead, I met Carl Johnson, who is now one of my fellow partners. But at the time, he was running Simon's Palmer, and I had experience on car accounts, and he said, "Would you like to help us run this car pitch we're doing?" So I did that. It was fun. Did a few weeks of doing that. Straight after that, he said, "Oh, that was a lot of fun. Would you stay and do another pitch with us? We're doing this other pitch." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's fine. I'll stay and do that." So I did that. And then after that, he said, "Well, you should just join. You should join." I said, no. I don't really want to be in advertising, so I'm not really sure I want to join. And you're actually quite a conventional agency, so you're not really my perfect brief, because you are really, you know, at the very creative but purely advertising end, and I really want to be more holistic than that. And he kept persisting, and eventually I decided to join, and I became an account director on the Sony PlayStation business. Which was amazing. It was very early PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, early days of gaming. And 6 months later, I resigned because I said, "I told you so, I don't want to be in advertising." And Carl said, "No, you're not going. We just need to find the right role for you in this industry." So Carl invented a job for me.
Like, where do you think that clarity, where did you get that from?
I don't know. I think it was just some degree of, I'll tell you what, traveling in particular
Yeah.
gave me loads of confidence, because one of the things about traveling on a very low budget is you realize that you can exist on this planet in so many different ways, and you don't need a lot of money to have an amazing life. And once you realize that, because everything else about your upbringing is, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to try and get good grades, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to try and get a good degree, I'm going to try and get a good job, and then I'm going to get a mortgage, get married, have kids, whatever.
That's it.
Once you stop and go traveling, you go, wow, there are so many different ways to live life. Most of it doesn't cost a lot of money. I can live in any climate, in any country, on any continent, and have a fun time. And that's always, you've always got that in your back pocket once you realize that there's always a plan that says, I can live an amazing life for very little somewhere else. So that meant I was very clear.
This is lovely.
And had a lot of self-belief in every conversation. So actually, when I came back, and maybe it's an important bit I missed out, was in my first interview with Carl, I actually said to them, "You're probably not the agency I would pick, but I know you've got a car thing to do, so I'm happy to do that." And they laughed. This is a very odd thing to say in an interview, that you're not. And I explained why. I said, because I think you're very motivated by creative rewards and advertising, and I'm actually motivated by marketing solutions and problem solving
Mm-hmm.
using marketing. I said, so I just want to be clear, said I can do the job, but this is where my motivation is. They thought it was very charming and odd that I would say that, but that endeared them to me. So as I say, it was a lot of fun. I got on very well with Carl and the rest of that crew. And after a couple of pitches and then taking on this full-time job, I realized I didn't want to be full-time account guy. And so Carl invented this job for me, which he would describe as consigliere. So if you've watched any of the Godfather movies, consigliere is the kind of right hand to the Don, advisor, fixer, facilitator. And so I became consigliere to Carl. That was great because actually it put me inside the business, understanding how the machine of advertising and marketing works, and very different levers to pull, very different understanding, and gave me a lot of freedom to run across things. So that was great. Enjoyed that. Then Carl got asked if he wanted to go and run TBWA in New York.
Can I jump in with one question beforehand? Because the way you describe what truly fascinated you and also made you say no quite a couple of times is that you're interested less in creative awards and more in actual marketing problem solving. And that is almost the exact wording on which, I mean, if you only delete marketing, that's almost the exact wording on which Marvin Bauer founded or made McKinsey big. So was there ever a temptation to go somewhere around there?
Well, I think we had we had various, when we started Anomaly, we had various references, and our popular references were Rem Koolhaas, IDEO, Crispin Porter, and McKinsey. So those were our muses as creative businesses that we admired and liked and were intrigued by, and wanting to create a business that pulled pieces from all those and delivered business solutions in creative ways. And I think that's probably, and when we first started this conversation, I talked about turning your frustration into fuel and your anger into energy. I think Saatchi's had made me quite frustrated and angry because they weren't really invested in solving people's marketing problems. And I took that and go, I really want to be doing that. I really want to be solving things. There's so many great brains and creative people here, and they're being wasted on making metaphors and analogies when actually you could point them at really pointed business issues where creativity might be the breakthrough in the solution. So that was always where I go, there's the analog. There's some brilliant minds that populate ad agencies, and sometimes they could be utilized in more creative and interesting ways, solving the business problem. So Carl got offered this job to run TBWA in New York. He said, Johnny, do you want to come with me? So in 99, moved to New York, take a leap of faith, another kind of important thing here, bit of a risk. And we go to the States in 99, beginning of dot-com boom 1. Amazing time to be in America. And I spent 18 years in America. In many ways, peak America in recent memories, like the growth of Google, the growth of Facebook, the growth of Apple, all these things happened over that period of time. When I arrived, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no iPhone. So many of these things that have shaped our industry and shaped modern culture happened and were born in the US and emerged over that period of time. So fascinating time to be there. And from day one, I was agitating Carl to turn TBWA New York into a holistic marketing solution business. And Carl was like, nope, we need to fix it as a good agency first, and then we'll worry about the stretch goal, which might be something else. So having done a reasonably good job at fixing it as an agency, I got back to that, my own evil agenda to create a holistic marketing services business. and would agitate Carl to go, we should do this, we should do that. And we tried to persuade Omnicom to let us grow it internally as a thing. But it was very clear that it wasn't going to happen. It's very hard to take big, successful organizations and persuade and to suggest them that there might be another way. So they go, well, actually, things aren't necessarily broken at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the incentive for us to change models and change things? Then a couple of things happened. 9/11 happened. Carl moved to Australia, left the network. I went to work for Wolf Collins and then Fahrenheit 212 because I was curious to learn. So I would often find things to, there was nothing I really wanted to do at TWA without Carl involved. So I did a freelance gig at Wolf Collins and then a more permanent thing at Fahrenheit 212, which is a product innovation company. And all those things were adding to my tool set and skill set and expanding my mind. And then Jason, one of my other co-founders, said, you know, that all those conversations we used to have about a different model and a different way to approach things and more holistic, we should do that. We should get Carl back from Australia and we should do it. And so 2004, got together, took another leap of faith, no money, no clients, just our laptops and a storage room at Radical Media in Hudson Avenue. And we started the business. And had never been poorer and never been happier than when starting a company, because you start with no salary. You spend all the money the company gets on employing other people, because that's, you need people to expand. So I have a strong memory of being at Friday evening drinks with like 10 or 15 people early on, and you know, the expectation is, oh, the partners are going to buy us drinks, and we'd all be going, right, the only people getting paid in this bar are you lot, and we need more money. But by all means, we'll buy the drinks, because you know what, in the long run, it all works out. But it's but it was brilliant. We were, you know, following our own passion, dream, and destiny, and it was a very exciting time to go for it.
One thing to ask, like, was it a foregone conclusion for you that it is a people business where growth comes through more people? Because when we founded, that was a major fork for us. When someone told us, nope, not going to get a cent of investment for any kind of consultancy or agency, it doesn't scale. And we're like, oh.
Well, I think we're not really motivated by money for the sake of money, and we're not motivated by scale for the sake of scale.
Yeah.
But we have no aspiration to be 20,000 people globally. We had an aspiration to create a business that we wanted to work at, that got asked interesting questions, where we had freedom to give interesting answers and make money doing that. And because there are many great businesses, there are many huge networks, McCann, Publicis, Ogilvy, these are great businesses. They are machines, but they are built to be machines where there are some known processes, known outcomes, consistency, repetition, and those things scale very well because they follow a set of rules. And the enjoyment we get from our work is people come in and we spend a lot of time going, are you even asking the right question? So we really start from scratch. There's not a single thing we try and sell anybody. We're trying to sell people success for their business. And that could be something quite mundane to do with pricing or distribution, or it could be to do with Super Bowl advertising. But we don't have a foregone conclusion. So as a result, it's a highly inefficient process, but it's a highly enjoyable process. And we built a business to be enjoyable, which is why, even though we are no longer owners of the business, we sold the business, we've all earned out, we're all still here because that hasn't changed. We still get briefs that we enjoy, that we get to work on, and it's good. So until that stops being the case, we'll be here. So I think that's the thing. So I think the
Can you talk about when did you sell it? Because
this process started more than a decade ago, actually, a decade ago.
Oh, wow. And you're still in.
Yeah.
This is unheard of.
But in a way, one of the guys, nothing's really changed. I don't think of it as being, technically I'm an employee, but I don't feel that way about the company, because it hasn't really changed in what we're doing or how we behave. And for us, selling was about finding somebody to invest in the business.
Yeah.
It's really what it comes down to. When we sold, we had 1.5 offices, and now there's like 6 offices in multiple markets, and we just wanted to have a geographic spread in countries that we were interested in going to, in cities that we love going to, places where there's great creative talent. And that's really the criteria for the network. Once again, the criteria for the network wasn't be in places to tick lots of boxes. It was to be in places that are creatively interesting, stimulating, where we can find talent and that we would actually enjoy going to visit and spend time with. So our business is a people business. It's where the bulk of the cost is.
Yeah.
But it's not a business that we've ever tried to design to keep scaling. And we know there's a limiter on our business because it is bespoke every time and because it has to be different every time. And one of the reasons why we expanded geographically was there's a point at which you go, Anomaly offices are better when they're not too big, because it's rare that scale makes you much better. Quite often scale makes you slightly worse. It means you can do different things, but actually it is that tightness where you can see what's happening and going on that is valuable. And what we spend a lot of time doing when we open offices or do partnerships is just find the right foundational crew, the people that think the same way we do, people that we have the same empathy that we do, same philosophy and principles. And that seems to have worked. So we have a phrase, high talent, low ego is kind of a requirement. We don't have a pyramid structure that has a deity creative director at the top. It's very flat. It's very democratic, slightly messy because of that. There's a lot of debate. There are a lot of whiteboards. It's very, I was like, Anomaly is a contact sport. You have to kind of get up in a room, wave your arms, write things on a whiteboard, discuss things. And once again, that's not for everyone. Some people would rather be in a more linear, known, consistent process, but that's the stuff that we love. I mean, I love being in meetings. The hardest thing I've had to learn as the company's got bigger is I have to let other people do that stuff. I have to be a participant rather than trying to run it, because you don't grow or expand, and you have to like hand over the reins to people and let people have dominion over what they're doing so they can get excited and get animated. But I just love being invited to meetings and being allowed to play with stuff. That's where I get my enjoyment.
It reminds me, like, I talked recently in one of those talks to Craig Maudsley, and he, very similar in a different way, but it seems to be also the joy of getting a problem and then having a go and finding out what having a go at it means.
Yeah, 100%. There is not a single category that I find dull. There is something interesting in any, from toilet paper to life insurance. It's all interesting because they all have weird rules and mechanics and how they make their money and how they're distributed and regulation. And you have to absorb all those things. It's great fun just learning. And then actually there's bizarrely something from toilet tissue that can solve a problem in life insurance and vice versa. Because there always is. There are always weird lessons in any category that you can transpose into something else. And one of the joys of being on the service side and not the client side is you get exposed to so many of those models and ways of thinking, and you get inspiration from everywhere. If you think about how we buy phones now, most people are on a financing model. You buy a phone, you keep it for a couple of years, you trade it in, you get another phone. That's just a thing that was borrowed from the car industry, which created financing as a model instead of buying outright. And in fact, then you realize that the money in car industry is made in finance. not in making the cars. And you go, wow, so the car industry is really a financial industry with cars as the object I'm borrowing money around. So all these little things go, how would that affect? I don't think we're going to be leasing toilet tissue anytime soon, but how can you transpose one thing to another? So those things are fascinating, and that's where the consultancy side of things, this is why consultancies are powerful, is they work across so many different categories and can ideally, if they're operating really well, pull those things in and apply those to a different category.
So again, let me put on, like we always, like we call our friend the venture dentist, who told us no people. And also on your side, because I love the idea of transferring these little things. Like it's literally very close to what our business model is. We have a database of what we call excitement points, where we find the rare moments where companies actually excite people. So have you ever thought about like 2 or 3 of those insights you just mentioned? Like I feel like immediately like, okay, need to drop this in there. Have you ever thought about somehow collecting them and make them usable, or would that take the fun out of it?
Well, it's interesting. Like we have a team, our AI team are building a kind of anomaly brain that contains a lot of this. So to make it kind of searchable, provocable, stimulate it, put in a category, pull from the archive of knowledge to do that. Because currently the version of that is anyone that's been around 20 years of Anomaly, those pastes exist somewhere in the back of my head, and my ability to pull from the random access memory, what's going on. And I guess, you know, one of the promises of AI and language models is if we have a private language model that is our knowledge base tapped into larger models that are the world's knowledge bases, that's interesting. So I think we're playing with that, and you know, we have it for doing what I would consider quite, you know, sort of the bread and butter stuff. Like, you know, somebody can send us an RFP and we can basically autofill a big chunk of it, and then obviously read through and see whether it makes sense or not. But a lot of that stuff can now be pulled from our knowledge bases, and I think that's going to get better and better. So yeah, so I do see that. I think, you know, we're definitely in the school of thought that says it's, you know, people using AI. It's a tool that enhances our ability. Because at the end of the day, as long as our customer is a person, the human interface is important. When we're selling to an AI, maybe I'm not needed, because our AI can speak to your AI. Just get out of the way. But a lot of our work, particularly upstream and the upper funnel work, you have people with emotion, opinion, politics to navigate. All our human frailties also exist within any marketing problem. And that's one of the other great lessons of this journey, is having brilliant ideas is probably only 25% of the game. Getting those ideas sold and made is the really hard part of the game, and then keeping them alive and protected as they manifest in various ways is like the really hard thing. So I think you realize that quite quickly, and a lot of those are EQ, emotional intelligence skills, versus just IQ. So I think AI has a way to go on the EQ that is obviously high on, you know, a semblance of a version of intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, no, actually, to a certain degree, I agree. But like, we had 2 key moments, and it's not even AI related, but we had a meeting with a big cheese from a car company, and he's like, yeah, I mean, we know basically how to excite car people, like we've been in the business, yada yada yada. And when we told them, yeah, but we could tell you how Tesla excites people, all the secrets, because people tell us, that's when he got interested. And that's what I meant, like that's when you can start collecting stuff. And on the other hand, when in that database, we have also one touch point that's basically chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a weird, like, I completely agree. Obviously, I don't know, but to my knowledge, I don't know whether chatbots have feelings, but chatbots can evoke feelings.
Yes.
So and the one thing we see so far, there's actually one, it's T-Mobile, and they managed to do it in Germany and the US, where their chatbot regularly evokes the feeling of friendship in Germans. And that's just where, to me, it was like, ooh, now it gets interesting. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very true, and I think you know one of the explosive areas of AI is AI friends, girlfriends, boyfriends,
oh God.
but that's very common now. It's a very common sort of use case, and I think the idea of AI doing a good job at taking on persona.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, AI doesn't have feelings in a conventional sense, but can replicate feelings that they have recorded in a data set. Like, what's an appropriate response to this
Yes.
situation?
Yeah.
And in a way, we are computers. We are, biological computers that are a series of, ones and zeros in a biological sense. And so we are computing continuously responses to a situation. Some of them triggered by our chemistry, some of them, our brain, which is chemistry, telling us to have this kind of chemistry. And actually, one of life's great challenges is how you, again, respond to situations. You have adversity. Do you let the chemistry overwhelm you, or do you fight the chemistry and turn it into something positive? And that's a kind of a life skill that people have to acquire. And I think computers can replicate that. So I do think we will have emotional relationships with technology. We already do. Think about our relationship with objects.
Of
The
course.
cases we put on them, the screens we put on them, the number of little things with cute eyes, Tamagotchis, and keeping
Yeah.
alive a thing with
Germans
a
and cars.
Jones cars, So I think the that's true. I think that's in a business sense, I guess. Do I think that the CMO of a company will be having a deep conversation with an Anomaly bot and feeling they're getting the right advice? And I've just come back from Cannes, which is a great example of it's a very productive week in the sense that you have a very intense series of catch-ups with all your clients. Basically, all your clients are there. A lot of talent is there, and you have tons and tons of conversations in a very relaxed setting where everyone is just slightly more open, glass of wine in hand, maybe, beautiful setting, and people, you have very thorough and deep conversations. That's about creating context, but it's very human things to break down people's meeting barrier when they're in a conference room in a meeting and they've got a time slot that's specifically this. All those things are changed slightly because of the content. So I mean, I think it's going to be fascinating. I enjoy the journey that AI is on. We are huge experimenters, but like all technologies, we are huge experimenters, and at the same time, always caution our clients not to feel the need to jump headfirst into these things, but to wait, understand. I think there's very little advantage necessarily in feeling that you have to be first in these areas. I think you have to deploy it well. I think Apple's a great example of they're rarely first, but when they go in a very thorough and rigorous way. Their manifestation of AI, again, it's a good example. They're not the first, but their presentation showed a lot of rigor, thoughtfulness, lots of small wins, rather than maybe the sensational big wins that AI purports to have today.
One of those Californian peeps, I think he said, "There's no point in being first. You need to be last in the market." So last question: if for whatever reason they booted you out at Anomaly or would shut it down, what would you do now?
It's a really good question, and one my wife sometimes asks. I don't know, because there isn't anybody I would like to work for per se. I don't look around and go, I'd really like to work for those businesses. Not because I don't respect them and think they're brilliant, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure they'd have me is the first thing, and then I'm not sure what I'd do there. It's actually, I think I'd like to do something quite different. I do have a fantasy of working. There's various categories. I like transition to sustainable energy is something that's a bit of a love of mine. So something in that field, or the environment, would be an area I'd like to do more in. Having been tech support for my aging parents, I have a weird desire to work at the Genius Bar in an Apple store, focusing on elderly customers and helping them make the use of technology. So that's another weird thing. It's not really about having a job. It's just more about a thing to do that I would enjoy. Teaching people how to use technology. And then also, for similar reasons, being a barista, because I quite like having conversations with people over coffee. And I don't think it would be a very successful coffee shop, because I'd be talking to customers all day instead of making coffees. But the idea of probably not the morning rush where everyone just wants a coffee to go, but more the mid-morning, something comes in, wants a bit of a chat, So, I haven't got a grand vision to create a startup in a fast-moving tech thing, but very human and empathetic places maybe to turn up in. So that's probably would be my next step, because I'm too late maybe to start golf. So I think I have to find something that's a bit more
Coffee
grounded.
sounds great. There's no reason not to be a barista, I think.
Exactly.
Excellent.
I like people and coffee. What could go wrong?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Johnny. That was super insightful for me. I learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Shall I go?